Today you're looking at a miracle of God's creative power. The living evidence that he can take two unique personalities and unite them in an ongoing process that will blend their bodies, minds, and souls into a new creative creature with two bodies, but one spirit. At best, it's sometimes difficult, and at times painful, as self dies and unity is born.
Now, to give you an idea of how great this miracle really is, we must look at the two parts which have come together. Bob and I are two very strong personalities. We're stubborn. We each want our own way, and sometimes that causes us to get angry and try to demand our rights. And some of that is because of the makeup of our nature, and some of it is because of our personality, and sometimes it's just circumstances.
I don't know, how many of you can agree that women and men think differently? You know, I really think her brain's wired differently than mine.
Perhaps. Bob found a very humorous illustration of this the other day on the internet, and it was a discussion back and forth among some computer geeks. Is the computer male or female? Do you refer to it as a he or a she?
Well, it's clear the computers are female because only their creator understands their internal logic.
Oh no, they're male because frequently they have a lot of data collected and sorted, and they're still totally clueless.
No, they're female. Because the native language that they use to communicate with each other is totally incomprehensible to the rest of us.
Oh, no. They are male. Because computers are supposed to help us solve problems, but they turn out being the problem.
You know, I'm convinced they're female because, like, that message you get on screen, bad command or file name, that's about as informative as, if you don't know why I'm mad at you, I'm certainly not going to tell you.
Oh, no, they're male. Because as soon as you commit to one, you'll find another version that is much better. I really haven't. 47 years, I never have.
But as soon as you make a commitment to one, you will end up spending half your paycheck on accessories. They're women, they're female.
Oh, no. Do I have to say this last one? Computers are definitely male because the only way to get their attention is to turn them on.
You know, maybe we need to move on. Maybe we need to move on. As we thought about this conversation for today, we realized that our community's Bible reading was bringing us to Corinthians, and Paul says so much about marriage. You know, I really don't believe it was accidental that our reading brought us to today, and it's not coincidental, it's not serendipitous that it happens to be our wedding anniversary, but it was obvious this is what we had to talk about, that we should share, both from Paul's writing and from other parts of the Word, we should look at, and from our own experience, we should look at what makes marriage work.
So we're going to share with you, in celebration of the miracle of the two of us and our lives, a bit about what the Word says about the progress of living a Christian marriage. And there are a number of principles for success in marriage that Paul lays out for us today. But we want to focus on 3 of them. 3, David, just 3. Okay. These 3 are mutual love, mutual respect, and mutual submission.
In order to put a foundation under what we're sharing, we need to go all the way back to what we were reading back in January. In our shared Bible reading this year, we began in Genesis in the first week of January, and we read Genesis 2. Genesis 2:24, which the Lord quoted in Matthew, says, "Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother, and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh."
Now, most of you know that Bob has trouble matching his socks or his clothing. He doesn't see colors the way that all of the rest of us see it, or most of us see it. So what I'm about to say, he has no clue about, but he takes it on faith. Now, I want us to think about colors, and I want us to think about the fact that there are only 3 primary colors in all the world. And from these 3, all other colors in the universe are created. And if we take 2 of those colors, the blue and the yellow, and mix them together, what color do you get? Green. And the more blue you get, the more blue-green it is, or the more yellow the more... And that is the way it is with marriage. That green is always green once you mix them together, but there are different shades of that green. Marriage, sometimes it's more one and more the other, but it is a blending of the 2.
Well, here's a way to look at that. It has nothing to do with colors or blending colors or telling the difference between red and green. You mean they are different? Okay. You know, you got to understand, and when I'm in traffic here in Dar es Salaam, those traffic lights are horizontal. I don't know whether green's on the left or the right. And so you'll notice, if you're with me in traffic, I watch what the other guys are doing.
Or wait for the horn to blow.
Yeah, I wait for the horn to blow, because in Dar es Salaam, if I just watch what the other guy's doing, I'm going to get killed. But anyway, but nothing to do with color. I've often said that Merle is a chisel in the hand of God that God uses to shape me into the image and the likeness of his Son. But in truth, we are both chisels in God's hand, shaping and forming each other to be not what we desire, but what God has planned from the beginning of time for us to become, in order to be of maximum use in his plan. And so that's part of the idea of mutual. We both are for each other more than we are for ourselves.
When I think about mutual love, Bob likes to say that the very, very, very first time he saw me, before he ever heard me speak, he fell in love with me. Well,
it was hormonal overdrive.
That love was extremely fragile. That's not the love that would have lasted 47 years. It's not, when we think about love, it's not, well, love is an action verb. It's an attitude, it's a behavior. But it's something that is ongoing. It's not a feeling or something you just have. It's something that grows. We need to see love as a tender seedling, that when it's planted, that tender shoot reaching from the earth, if that plant gets plenty of care and water and fertilizer, it will grow. And it can become a mature tree and produce fruit. But if it's not cared for, it will wither and die. The seed will blow away, or the plant once planted will wither and die. And so will love. But with care, it becomes a great tree, blossoming, giving beauty. that will stand against the storm and will give us shade in spite of the Dar es Salaam heat.
Later on, in a few moments, we'll read 1 Corinthians 13. But in that passage, Paul describes making love. Now, you never read it that way, did you? When I say making love, I don't mean the act of sex, but doing love. In the idea of preferring one another, of putting the other out in front. Now, Merle has demonstrated love over the years by becoming an adventurer. She grew up in a little village in North Carolina that isn't on anybody's maps. It's called Rabbit's Corner. I've asked how it got that name, and well, it's pretty obvious, they're rabbits. But over the years, she has stifled her fears and braved deep water, wild animals, old Russian airplanes, to stay with me. She's eaten the inedible and learned new languages to be with me. Most of the time, she swallows her fear. But if you see the two of us out on Ali Hassan Mwinye in the afternoon, you may notice that she has her hands over her eyes. Now, fortunately, she's not driving. But she has her hands over her eyes, not because she's praying, but because she's terrified. She doesn't want to watch the chaos.
One of the ways that Bob shows his love for me is that he is willing to stay at home on an evening and eat a simple meal instead of going out for a steak at a fine restaurant, because he knows that I prefer to stay at home. And so he would rather, he's okay staying at home and even eating scrambled eggs for supper. Mutual love also brings us to mutual respect. If we truly love, we will respect each other. There's a verse in Proverbs 31 where it is talking about the noble wife. But there's a verse in I think it's verse 23, and it says that her husband is respected in the gates. But that respect is not seen unless the wife, first of all, respects her husband. And though Bob and I, we're human, and you better believe that in 47 years, there have been disagreements, but we've learned to not disagree in public. We've learned to not put each other down. If he makes me upset, I'm not going to go to you and complain about him, because I should respect him. If I have a problem with him, I will tell him.
And God.
And God. And we keep our disagreements in private.
You know, the hormones of estrogen and testosterone are a natural part of life, and each stimulates behavior and development. Testosterone, the male hormone, it does more than stimulate hair growth and sexual appetite. A number of years ago, when I began to sense what was going on in Merle's life as far as where God seemed to be taking her in this field of educational development, I realized that the day would come when she might become the figure who was more out in front and more public than I. And I knew that I might have difficulty with that because of testosterone. That she would become the known and I would be largely unknown. And I was going to need to deal with my ego and my testosterone. I began to pray, and I asked others to pray, that I might be able to deal with it successfully. At a recent international meeting, thousands and thousands of people there, from all over the world, we kept encountering African church leaders who, to them, I was a stranger, but she was a dear friend. She was their teacher, their coach. And as we would walk around the crowd, she kept getting pulled into hugs. And I stood back, and then they would look towards me like, who's this bearded guy? And I'd say, hi, I'm Dr. McCully's husband. And you know what? That's okay. It's exciting to see it happen. My respect for her gifts, her talents, her calling, has meant that indeed I must sometimes step to the back and let her shine, let her spread her wings, and if necessary, be the wind under her wings to send her forward. But the reward of that is that Proverbs 31 is true. Her commitment to ministry and her success in the marketplace of life brings me respect at every gate that I pass. And when people ask me about my doctorate, I tell them I have a PhD, putting honey through.
And that brings us to the final aspect, mutual submission. Now that's a word we don't like to use. We like to just throw it away because we like our own way. We like doing it ourselves. But submission is very much a part of God's plan, not only in marriage, but in relationships. In spite of the fact that we want to be independent and we want to be on our own and do it our own way, if a marriage is to work, there has to be mutual submission. We have to learn to give and take. Now, how does that work? Well, I'd like to say that if the first two, mutual love and mutual respect, if those two are in place, then frankly, you don't have much problem with mutual submission. Because the first two working together will almost produce a mutual submission. Here's the way it played out in my life. I have loved the nearly 40 years that God has given us to live here in Africa. God called me here when I was young, just a young person before I ever met this fine, handsome young man.
Skinnier then. This shirt would have fit then.
No, it would have been too big. I have to tell you, the first time I saw him, I was up on the stage at the church, and he was sitting way back in the crowd, and I saw him, and I thought, that's a new guy in church.
Hormones happen.
And when I met him, I was so surprised because I got up to him, and here's this cute little blonde mustache that you couldn't see until you got right to him. But anyway, all of those many years ago, I realized that God had called me to Africa, and so we came together. But then a few years ago, I realized I no longer had to live in Africa to do what God had called me to do. The burden was lifted, the desire was lifted, and I longed to go back and live in the U.S. and to be close to the grandchildren and spend time at our little cottage in Virginia. But Bob was not ready to leave Africa. Bob was just coming out of a difficult situation, and he was not ready to leave Africa. The leadership then asked him to come to Dar es Salaam, and he agreed. He wanted to come. But he knew I desperately wanted to go back to Virginia. But I submitted. And I came with my husband because I believed that was the will, God's will. And I had promised to love him and to cherish him. And I must admit, I have thoroughly enjoyed my 2 years. I have loved coming to get to know you. So I would do it over again. But that was the first of it. Before I knew you and loved you, I submitted, and God was there. Another aspect of this mutual submission, I have a person, I'm really an introvert. Now, some of you may not believe that, but I really am an introvert. I could spend my days in my house, not going out. Give me a good book or a good sewing machine, and I never leave the house. Bob is very much a social person. He loves interaction. And so mutual submission says that sometimes I will submit and go to those social events and try to talk and be nice and sociable, but then sometimes he allows me to stay home.
One of the simple ways that plays out for both of us is Merle does not enjoy watching television. We can count on the fingers of two hands the number of movies, the times she's gone to a theater to watch a movie in all of these years we've known each other. And sometimes she's gone in submission, kicking and screaming, at least inside. And but yet this girl who doesn't like watching television last year gave me a 42-inch flat screen for a birthday present. Now, it doesn't live in the living room when she's home because she doesn't like television in the living room. And she doesn't want it dominating the space. She likes playing cards and table games. And honestly, those things give me little pleasure. But I play them in submission. Now, her ministry demands she travel a great deal, and the television is on wheels. So when she leaves, when I come back from the airport, or when the taxi leaves, I go get the TV out of the bedroom, the guest room, and bring it back out where I can enjoy it sitting in the recliner. And then our houseman knows the day she comes back, the TV goes back in its own little space. Because in the evenings, if I'm alone, I enjoy kicking back and watching an episode of NCIS or Leverage or something. But she returns, the TV goes back. On a simpler level, when I'm driving by myself, if I passed you in traffic, if I'm alone, you may have noticed that I tend to drive competitively. Okay? I want that next empty spot. And I will do my best to get it. However, when she's in the car, I'm okay with the side of the car saying the Ocean International Church. When she's not in the car, I try to forget that sign is there. Okay? And sometimes I really have to repent. But then, here's another thing. I prefer big chunks of tomato in my pasta sauce. And I like potato peels and garlic in my mashed potatoes. But when she's home, I prepare a smooth pasta sauce, what she prefers. And when she's gone, there are really big chunks of tomato in the sauce, okay? And when she's home, our mashed potatoes are smooth and it's cream. But when she's away, I don't peel the potatoes. Submission happens.
In summary, I've heard it often said that marriage is 50-50 proposition, but if you've been married very long, you know that's not true. So don't even expect it, Edgar. 50-50 doesn't work. In fact, many times it's a 15-85. You're given far more than you are receiving. But the beautiful thing about marriage that has mutual love, mutual respect, mutual submission, it might be 85-15 one week, but then somehow or another it comes around and it switches, and the next week it's 15-85. And that always tends to even out. But actually, we need to be prepared to always give 125%.
Yes.
And even if you're in overdraft, well, the tables will turn and God will even it out. Because as you walk in mutual love with each other, mutual respect, and mutual submission to each other and to God, then your marriage will be all that God intended it to be.
Some might say, you know, that's more than I'm willing to give. My ancestors come from Scotland, and the Scots are known for being tight with money, you know, squeezing a shilling till it breaks. And there's an old Scotch saying, you know, because back in the day before electric lights, the Scots used candles and candles were expensive. But there was an old Scots saying, the light is worth the cost of the candle.
If we follow these 3 basic principles, then our love will reflect what Paul says, what he wrote about in the 13th chapter of this great letter that we have read this week, the letter he wrote to the Corinth church.
Chapter 13, verse 4. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud.
It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs.
Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth.
It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres.
Love never fails. Would you pray with us?
Father, I would just like to bring each man here, each young man, each older man, whether they're married or not. Father, I just want to bring them before you. Touch their hearts. It's so easy to get into the ego thing. But Lord, help them to see that in whatever type of relationship that they're trying to build, whether it's a marriage relationship or whether it is a partner relationship, a business relationship, help them to see that it's not only about themselves. Let them first of all submit to you, Father. Just as Catherine's beautiful poem said this morning, Lord, help them to put you at the center of their life. And then help them to have the courage and the strength to build the relationships that you would have them to build.
Father, I pray for every woman in this place today, the wives and those who are not married, those who hope to be married. I pray for their dreams, their hopes. But Father, I pray that they may be centered on you, that they indeed may be Christ-centered. And Father, that you would imbue within them a culture that lends itself towards mutual love, mutual respect, and mutual submission. And Father, that you will be glorified in their lives. Father, that you will be their authority. But Father, work your will in their lives. Glorify yourself in them, I pray. Work your will in them. As they surrender to you, may you bless them. And Father, for every couple, I pray. Maybe they're just beginning, maybe they're just about to begin. But Lord, I pray for them, the joy that you have given Merle and I, as we have chosen to walk with you and to focus on you. You have blessed us. You've blessed us with health. You've blessed us with a home. You've blessed us with kids that love you. And most of all, you've blessed us with each other. And I thank you for that. And I ask you for one thing for us. May it continue happening. May we continue to grow. May Merle and I continue in your spirit. In Jesus' name, amen. Ready for takeaways?
I was blessed to hear the reports of the burn parties. That was exciting to me, the number of you that actually had burn parties. Somebody asked me, so you spend all of this time every week giving takeaways. Do people really do it? Well, I guess sometimes they do.
In fact, Tuesday evening, remember the fire truck?
Oh my gosh. just about the time that I knew Brenda's expo was about to start, and I knew that several others in our vicinity was about to start, never before have I seen this, but a monster fire truck comes blaring down our street. And I'm going, oh no, I hope it's not a burn party. I haven't heard of any disasters, so I guess we're okay. All right.
First slide.
All right, we realize that probably the majority in the room this morning are not married. But some of you hope to be soon, and others hope to be. So, we still want you to think about these things. And for those of you who are married, then we hope that this week you'll give thought to these three principles: love, respect, and submission. Take time to talk about it together. For the rest of you, think about a relationship that you might be struggling with, and think how these principles could be used. What would God have us say? Because 1 Corinthians 13 was not written just for married people, but it was written for all the disciples, all of the church. So let's think on those things. Now, how can you apply these principles to a future relationship?
Slide.
Do we have the verses?
Look, go back to that last slide. Go back. Yeah.
All right. I know that we didn't take a lot of time to read various verses this morning, but if you have time quickly to copy these verses down, they will also be on the posted sermon on the website. But from Romans, from Ephesians, from Peter, from Proverbs, take time to read through these verses and think again how they can be used in a relationship. And this week, all over Dar es Salaam, let us think about mutual love, mutual respect, and mutual submission. And let us build the kingdom in relationships that God would be pleased with. God bless you, and have a wonderful week in Dar es Salaam. Oh.
One other thing.
Oh.
One other thing. I came across a story as we're preparing for this. That's okay, Dom. I came across a story as we're preparing for this of a young man who had grown up in an orphanage. He had never been exposed to the relationship that could exist between a husband and a wife. He had never experienced parenting as such. He'd grown up in an institution. And he grew and finished his education and went to college. He was very shy. He wasn't a social animal. But one day a girl fell in love with him. And she got in his face. And finally she persuaded him to propose marriage. And at the wedding, her father came to the young man and he gave him a gift. He says, "This is the key to your success in your marriage with my daughter." And he opened the box, fumbling, he opened the box, and there's a lovely watch. Much nicer than this $10 one that I wear. And, but a lovely watch, and inscribed on the face was, "Say something nice to Sarah every day." Now, the story came out at his 50th wedding anniversary when he showed people his watch. They said, "How did it work?" He said, "I learned to say something nice to Sarah every day." So here it is. Say something nice to him or her, H. Say something nice to him or her every day. Okay? And if you do that, you've got a leg up on the climb to a good marriage. Say something nice. And a great relationship. Say something nice to him or her, inside, outside of marriage. Say something nice to him or her every day. Okay? We love you guys. And you know what? we're going to keep on keeping on.